All right, we'll go ahead and jump in. Can everyone hear me okay? Can I get a quick thumbs up from everyone? Awesome. Great. Well, thank you for all of you that have joined us on this call today. We're excited to jump in and have our panelists and talk about the topic of engaging your board during COVID-19 crisis. My name is Kevin Pappas. I'm the training manager here at OneOC. I have the opportunity to get to narrate some of the conversation today and engage with our panel. And then at the end, we'll also have a time, if we have enough time, for some Q&A if you have additional questions about topics that aren't covered. But feel free to use the chat feature during the call if you have specific questions that come up. If I could please ask you to make sure that you're muted. I know that these are challenging times. We're all at home. We have young ones. We have families, lots of stuff going on. So if you're not talking, if you could please keep your microphone muted, it'll just help us with all the feedback and everything. This is also being recorded. So for those of you that aren't able to tune in, we'll be sending this out and it'll be available on our nonprofit resource page as well. Just a few quick reminders. Wanted to let you know that we do have a wide variety of other webinars that we've been doing. I'm sure some of you have tuned into those, but we have some coming up next week that I wanted to make you all aware of. So we have one coming up on Friday, navigating your organization's financial support options. So that'll be with Peter Myers, who's the senior lending officer at Farmers and Merchants Bank. So we'll be discussing the different lending options and financing options for our nonprofits, covering the SBA loans, the payroll protection program, and some other stuff. So if that's something that's of interest to you, that'll be on Friday. And then we also next week have some marketing communications topics, as well as different insurance conversations around how to save money on your premiums during this time, as certain staff have been furloughed and you're not operating at your full capacity. So all of the webinars, previous recordings, and ones that we have come up are on our nonprofit resource center page at oneoc.org. So feel free to check that out. And I also wanted to let you know that we are introducing something new at OneOC. Some of you might have heard of it, but we're doing our office hours. And so what that is you can go on our website and sign up to meet with one of our nonprofit professionals, and they can walk you through a 15-minute session to address some of your questions. And they're covering topics like organizational strategy, questions around how to engage your board, like we're addressing today, funding support, corporate and volunteer recruitment. And then we also have some of that back office support as well with our HR and compliance and accounting and financial management. So if you need support or have specific questions that are contextual to your organization, feel free to sign up with that on our website. It's a great resource for you guys. But that's pretty much all the announcements. Today's webinar, like I said, we're going to be discussing how to engage your board during COVID-19. We just recognize that OneOC, and we've heard a lot of feedback from our members and from other nonprofits that this is really a time of great flux, obviously, for everyone. And what that flux has a tendency to do is it amplifies your organizational strengths, and it also uncovers the weaknesses that are in your organization and potential growth points and opportunities for change. And so one of those growth points might be your board, their level of engagement, their level of participation, their understanding of how to, what their level of involvement is in a time of crisis like this. And so we're really excited to have a group of CEOs representing different nonprofits with different sized boards to share how they've been engaging their board during this time, and offer some best practices, maybe share some stories and narrative of how they've gone about it. Yeah, and just really get the conversation going of what does it look like. So we have a wide variety of questions that I'll be asking today. We're really thankful for our affiliate consultant, Cindy Fallon, was able to get those crafted for us. So I'll be asking our panelists about those today. On the call, just so you know who will be sharing today, we have Robert Santana, who's the CEO of Boys and Girls Club of Central Orange Coast. Thanks for joining us, Robert. We also have Alison Edwards, who's the CEO of OC Human Relations. We have Madelynn Hirneise, who's the CEO of Families Forward. We have Noel Burcelis, who's the CEO of Ronald McDonald House. And then our very own Tim from OneOC, who's our president and CEO. So we're excited to have everyone on the call today. I'll go ahead and jump into some of these questions. But to start, I'd love to hear from our panel, just to kick us off. Is there anyone that wants to share just kind of a success story that you've had with engaging your board Robert, Tim, let me know that you've had some success in the area. I might pull on you to start us off. Just sharing some high-level success and how you've been engaging your board during this time to kick us off.
Great. I hope everyone's doing great. Thank you, Kevin. So here at the Boys and Girls Club, we were in close communication with the school districts leading up to the shutdowns on March 17th. So we started our board dialogue about a week before things kind of got into high gear, anticipating that the school closures were coming. And so the first thing that we really needed to focus on was kind of the mission, that high level, the why sort of discussion. We feel that there's kind of three main stages to something like this. The first is us all making sure that we're on the same page and aligned to the mission, that we all agree that we are supposed to do certain things, really kind of the core value gut check. The next stage, after we're all in agreement that this is something that we have to respond to and have to evolve to, is a strategy. What does that look like in terms of a response? How do we get outside experts to give us their opinion? How do we leverage what we know based on what's in front of us so we can put together a good strategy? And then the last piece is the implementation of that plan, really pulling the lever and then doing what we said we're going to do. So those first several days was really focused on the why, because during times like this, the business of what we're all in changes. We're asking ourselves if we could do things that we've never done before. We're asking ourselves if we should take a step back, and what all that looks like. So we activated the board via WebEx and just started having a very clear understanding around what our mission was. And I felt it was important at that stage that if someone didn't feel like this is their cause, this is the time that we needed them to kind of step away, because what's coming ahead is going to be difficult. And we needed people that were willing to make tough decisions and have the courage to step up. And so luckily everyone agreed. But you have to imagine, as a Boys and Girls Club, the discussions are, well, shouldn't we just shut down everything and just kind of wait for everything to blow over? Or wouldn't that be the safest thing to do? And I think that we all have that instinct to kind of avoid conflict and avoid danger. But our board really stepped up and aligned with our executive and leadership team in that, during times like this, during times of crisis, the people that needed us before need us even more. And there's going to be people that maybe didn't need us that need us now. This also means that we're going to probably put on different hats that we've never worn before. And so that has really led us to the last few weeks having a lot of regular contact with our board via WebEx or Zoom sessions and having a good dialogue. And the way that it's framed up, because it's difficult to have a group discussion with so many people, logged in, is we'll put together a deck. We'll present to the best of our knowledge what information looks like as of that minute, knowing that, as we all have learned, everything's changing so fast. And then from there, what we feel the opportunities are and what the threats are, what the financial impact might be, and really just making sure we're doing a well-rounded presentation of options, and then just getting dialogue. And I will say we probably have had more board conflict in the last couple of weeks than we have in the last few years. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I think conflict is good and it's healthy, but we have had a lot more pushback around, well, should we be doing that? And, what are we stepping into and what's the ripple effect to that? And so I think it's been really good for our board to look at it from that lens. And we've been looking at risk through a couple different lenses. The first is, what's the financial risk? If we do this, what is that going to look like financially for the organization? The health risk, if we're putting people out there, we have to ensure that the safety of kids and parents and staff are our first and highest priority. Then there's, risks to the brand. What happens if we screw something up? So for the last couple of weeks, we've rolled out food to those most vulnerable during this crisis. We've been supporting other nonprofits that are on the front lines. We've been delivering virtual club services via tools like this so that we can connect with kids and ensure they have that social, emotional, and tutoring support. But the most riskiest part is that we started serving the kids of first responders and healthcare professionals, which means I'm activating staff and we're serving those kids, following all the safety guidelines that are set, by the government and health professionals. But that's sort of the stuff that I'm losing sleep over, is just, even though it's the right thing to do and we're doing everything we can to make sure that it's done appropriately, I still don't, I'm sure, like all of us, we're not going to feel well until we're all through this together. But I think for us, that was probably our biggest movement, is us actually serving kids in person, recognizing that the kids of healthcare providers and first responders can't work remote, and a lot of their childcare infrastructure has collapsed in the last couple of weeks. Their babysitters aren't showing up anymore out of fear. A lot of parents rely on the school system for childcare, and that's essentially not there. And there's a lot of female workers in the healthcare profession that are the primary caretaker or a single mom, so they rely on organizations like us for childcare. But I think no one really knows the answer. There's no crystal ball, but the best we can do is rely on our heart and what we feel the mission is, the core values, and then make sure that we have the best plans that we can develop through that.
That's great. Thank you, Robert. I really appreciate the starting high level and engaging with mission. And as all of us, we've had to get extremely creative during this time, figuring out ways that we can still serve our mission, even though we don't have the normal access that we do. I'd love to hear from Alison or Madelynn, if one of you wants to jump in and share how you've been engaging your board during this time, or maybe some creative strategies that you guys have found. We can go with Madelynn first.
I'll do a little hand raise. Well, good morning, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I think Noel and I we're on the same page when we hope to learn much more than we can contribute. But really looking at creative ways to engage with our board. Our board is actually 30 board members, which is probably, some of you might be, that's pretty high. So some of you might be feeling bad for me, but I really have an incredible board. And their primary function is a fundraising board. And so a lot of our board members are volunteers, and they are either retired or they're working. And what we've really learned over the last month is that they miss that communication and that engagement. And so one of the things that we've been doing is walking through with our board members how to get onto Zoom and all these technological platforms, but how do we engage with our board members in a weekly check-in? And so what I'm doing is we're using SharePoint at Families Forward, and so we actually have a board portal within SharePoint. And I know there are lots of platforms out there like Boardable and all sorts of things, but having a weekly update from me personally, just checking in, sharing that, really honest and raw, has really helped us to continue the engagement. It helps keep them involved and connected and to be advocates for the mission. And when they're hearing our updates in the demand for the food pantry services, they're able to go out and share with their friends and their colleagues, hey, Families Forward needs food. And so that's been really one of the key things that I've utilized in order to connect with our board, is just a really personal connection point of, here's what the update was this week, here's what we did well, here's what we're doing next week, and let's stay connected. So I think that's been really helpful. The other way we've been engaging with our board is having them do thank you calls, which is pretty typical, but right now they've got a lot more time to do thank you calls. And we've been very fortunate to have community support, lots of community support coming through. And so keeping our board members engaged in doing those personal phone calls for almost every donation level. $25 doesn't matter. You're going to get a call from a board member because they've got time and they want to support. And it was really, really funny, actually. Our board chair ended up having a city staff member, a local city staff member on their list. And so through that conversation, it actually led to the city doing a drive-through collection event for food for us. So really, again, getting the board engaged, but they know what's going on, so they feel comfortable to share on behalf of the organization and really express what our needs are.
That's great. Alison, anything to add, or Noel, to piggyback on that?
Yeah, well, our board kind of had to I guess back into getting engaged really quickly because we have a spring fundraiser and it's our only fundraiser of the year. So we had to make a decision really quickly whether or not to move forward with that. And of course, as this has unfolded, it's pretty clear we're not going to be doing that. But that kind of I guess got everyone engaged pretty quickly. But I would agree definitely with what Madelynn said, is that following that, it's really about lots of sharing of information. There's no such thing right now as over communication. In our organization, we are the end of a 2-year program kickoff, and in those 2 years, we had agreed to dip into some of our reserve in order to start that program. So for our board, what they really want is lots of financial information, because we were expecting this year to not have to do that after 2 years of doing it. So that became really important in the minds of the board, the finance committee. So for me, it's been lots of screen sharing of spreadsheets and things like that, so that my board has a very clear understanding of best case and worst case scenarios moving forward. But I think that's been really helpful for them. It's been really helpful. They've given me a pretty wide latitude in decision making because they feel really well informed right now.
Well, anything to add?
Yeah, I just have to first start off, and as I'm looking at the names of 33 participants on the call, I'm really humbled, and I'm just know that I'm sending positive energies to everyone on this call, because I'm just reminded, as far as we're service oriented, and all the impact that we're making out in the community. Again, I'm just at the very basic level so grateful to be a colleague of yours in serving our community. Just a few things. I really echo what's been shared before. Some of the highlights for us and challenges was, we had our biggest fundraiser, our 5K walk, and it generates the largest amount of money for the Orange County Ronald McDonald House. And it was April 5th, and it was supposed to be at the Honda Center. And this year we have a $200,000 shortfall from our revenues. So you can imagine, much like everybody else, it's like, now what the heck am I going to do? Where are we going to find that? How are we going to make up that difference as we look for the rest of the year? So there was that challenge that we've just undergone, and it was at the timing. But on the upside of things, what I've seen resonate with our board is they want to know the basic needs that we're providing, right? So the Ronald McDonald House, we have a 20 guest room house. We're providing care for families that are seriously ill, that have seriously ill children, and they stepped up. So when our board members shared this, that when I had shared that Global has discontinued new admission, that we're redirecting them to the hotels, one of our board members stepped up with a $10,000 donation and said, since our revenues are in question, that we had a shortfall, I don't want us to take any more. And so our board member said, I will make and cover the hotels. Other board members talked about, are we still feeding our families? What about the meal groups that prepare meals? We created an emergency fund, and one of our board members rallied other McDonald's owner operators to step up. And we've had an influx of that emergency fund has raised about $7,000. So we're really pivoting. I mean, we're like everyone else, grasping for what do we do? But what I'm finding is people need to connect with the needs out there, and they're wanting to do something. And so that emergency fund we did on the fly, we created in 2 days a classy page, and people are stepping up for that. They want to feed families, they want to help families, they want to make sure that our families' basic needs are met. They want to make sure our families are sheltered. So if I had to say there's a plus, it's that during this time, people are moved to do something, those who can, and we recognize those who economically are being impacted cannot, but there are those who can. And so much like the other practices, the virtuals, the the asking our board members to make calls to our donors. Add to the mix. We're in a capital campaign. We're in a $12 million capital campaign. So what do we do now? Is it insensitive for us to ask for monies, large amount of monies during the economic uncertainty? So we're all in the same boat. I'm sure we're having the same things too. We've pivoted right now temporarily for our boards to at least be on the forefront of our donors' mind, to thank them, to ask them how they're doing. And we're not making an ask, but really just kind of checking in on our board members, our supporters. And we're hopeful that that would pay dividends when things do change, and hopefully in the near future.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for bringing that up, Noel. That point of stewarding those relationships is so crucial right now. And we're all asking ourselves that question of how do we go about asking for monies for things like capital campaigns or events that we've already pre-established and had plans? What's insensitive? What's kosher? What's okay to ask during this time? So yeah, that's a great point. Tim, I'm curious if you want to jump in and summarize maybe a little bit of how OneOC's board's been activated, how you've been leveraging the unique skill sets of our board to tackle some of our problems at OneOC.
Sure, thanks, Kevin. Good morning, everybody, and thanks again to Robert, Alison, Maddie, and Noel for sharing your insights and your stories regarding how you're engaging your board. At OneOC, we have a 28-member board, so it's on the larger side. And when this all hit us hard and so fast, it was a whirlwind. And it was just in the first week or two, just trying to figure out, first is what's the communication cadence? Many of you've heard from the four other executives on the call. I think that was paramount. Having a hands-on board that has been engaged in the organization and really is passionate about our mission was, we knew that if we didn't establish a communication cadence quickly, we were going to have 20 board members calling me every day or every week, just trying to lend their support, which is wonderful. But also that can be a distraction. So the concern of the board was that we get too inundated with too much guidance and support and ways of trying to help in the name of good intentions. So what we did was we established a board steering team made up of the chair, past chair, finance chair, our board governance chair, and then our strategy chair. And we have a conference call every Wednesday for 45 minutes. And we focus in on what's mission critical. So we really highlight what's mission critical for that week, what's important, and then what's strategic, but maybe not urgent, right? So what are the things that we also need to be considering the background? Much like what you've heard from the others that have shared their stories, the first part of what we had to assess was we had to do a lot of scenario planning. We had to ensure we had our oxygen masks on first so that we can ensure we had a sustainable model. So we really engaged our board, and they really challenged especially the finance committee and our board steering team on what's the current operating model? What does that need to, what are the considerations we need to look at? What's the most likely case, but unfortunately, what's the worst case? And much like what Alison was sharing, we're really diving into numbers to say, okay, this is what it looks like, because we exist to accelerate nonprofit success to help each one of your organizations. So we have to ensure that we had that sustainability model. The second was the response to the community. And that goes back to some of the work that we do. For instance, we're the emergency volunteer center for the county in a time of disaster response. And a lot of our board members weren't even aware that we provided that service. So trying to get a board that understood that we had this responsibility, this obligation in our county has been quite the undertaking over the last 30 days. The other is the work that Amanda Green on our team and Kevin, who is moderating the call today, we went forward and we were asked to put together a nonprofit resources page and these learning groups, or excuse me, these peer support groups for the nonprofits in our community. And we felt that was the right thing to do. So getting the board involved in those discussions and understanding why that it's so important that we continue to do the work because it's the right thing to do while balancing it with our operating model. So I think that's where the board's been very helpful. We have a board giving campaign that we do. It's a personal giving campaign each year of the board. We have a total dollar amount that goes back to providing support for our work that we're doing with nonprofits. And typically that's in May. And, they challenge that and say, let's move that up to April. So our board is currently in their giving campaign. And we've seen actually an increase in our board gifts so far the first 2 weeks of our campaign, which has been encouraging. The other thing that the board has helped with is they're willing to go out and speak to former board alumni and ask them if they can participate and get involved in the giving program. So I think besides the giving, the operating model and looking at our scenario and business planning, there's also the issue of board governance. So as you think through, like many of us have applied for the Paycheck Protection Program. Well, those are loans. And what's the dialogue and discussions that you're having with your board around the approval process? Things are happening so quickly and so fast. What's your governance model in relationship to getting these elements documented, ratified, or approved based upon your bylaws and how your organization operates? So I think that's what we've been now focusing on, is ensuring that as things are moving quickly, ensuring that we're also following good governance practices. So it's been the board has been very supportive in what we're doing, and I think overall there's been a lot of learning, and as many of you have shared on this call, it's actually increased certain levels of engagement of our board in a different capacity than we had prior to the crisis. So that's a little about what's going on in OneOC and how we've engaged our board.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, it's a great point. Like we talked about in the beginning, these are the times of flex where board members are going to be stepping up, or they're, like Robert kind of alluded to, if this isn't the mission you feel committed to at this time, this is the time to pivot. Next question I had for the panel is, it sounds like the majority of you guys have identified the key issues at hand. I'd love to hear how you've intentionally leveraged the unique skill sets of your team on your board to tackle some of these issues. Robert, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. I actually was writing notes just exactly around that kind of topic. We're looking at board engagement through kind of 3 different lenses. The first is the general communication to the board, making sure that they're getting all the type of information that they would need as a general board. So the financials, updates, and those are probably, they look more frequent than they normally look throughout the year. The second is how we've been activating board members around their specific expertise. So we've been doing a lot more board task forces. We do a lot of task forces throughout the year, but it seems like this month specifically, I'm activating different kind of pods. We're activating our attorneys on the board to help us really look at risk and develop release of liabilities and that sort of stuff. We have a doctor that is a physician at Strauch that has been a huge support for us as we're looking at safety policies and training for our staff. Obviously, the finance folks have helped us with our SBA loans and kind of financial forecasting. We're also doing a CFO search, so we're doing interviews via Skype. So I have half a dozen kind of small groups that are working on projects with us based on skill set. And then it's just the one-to-one. I like to, throughout the year, make sure that I have a good personal connection to each board member and, get together for dinner and make sure we have that kind of, offline discussion. And obviously during times like this, that's challenging. So I've just been doing phone calls and text messages to individual board members, especially because we're going through a lot of decision making. Sometimes people don't speak up in a boardroom or in a virtual boardroom. So I've been kind of activating individuals, just checking in, seeing how they are doing, and then just getting their opinion of how we're doing. And so those three kind of lines have helped us ensure that we're not missing anyone, and that we're truly kind of getting everyone's concern there. But I think given the landscape of things and just the challenges, activating people specific to what their skill set is extremely important. I've also asked everyone that, you know, on the board, that if it's not, you know, extremely urgent, and, you know, if they can help us with just not putting stuff on our plate. So that's helped us with just reducing noise. You know, things that kind of come up throughout the year. I think that's helped us just ensure that our staff is focused on the highest priorities.
That's great. Thank you, Robert. Madelynn, anything to share on that question in regards to how you guys are tackling that families forward?
A lot of similarities. You know, we're fortunate enough to have an HR attorney on our board, so really understanding in the very beginning what, you know, the furlough process, Emergency Family Medical Leave Act, all of those fun questions. So that was really, really helpful. Like Robert, we were in the process of hiring a chief program officer, and navigating that world through Zoom is challenging. And we've actually pivoted from that in order to make sure that we have support for this staff moving forward, but really involving the board and utilizing their talents and expertise. Again, like Robert mentioned, you know, we had an emergency, it was a proactive emergency finance meeting, right? And so really having our board members to help with cash flow projections and looking at, you know, is it the right time for us to pull a line of credit? I mean, these are the questions that I know we're all asking ourselves. And then personal to me, you know, I'm really lucky. For those of you that don't know, I've only been in this position since October. Actually have 2 board members. And so we meet once a month, maybe. Am I cutting out? Is my audio bad? No? Good? Okay. And so really I've been able to utilize that transition team and have a core group, including my board chair, to say, here's the tough questions. And similar to what Tim mentioned, but it's having that strategy team. I already had that in place. And so I was very fortunate to be able to leverage that relationship and be able to have a sounding board.
Great. Thank you, Madelynn. Alison, anything to add?
You know, I have to say, I'm not sure I'm doing this great right now. I'm not as new as Madelynn. I'm 2 years in, though, and I did take over for a founder, like some of you I know Madelynn did as well. But so the board culture, consequently, in our organization has been a little bit more maybe CEO driven than some of the other organizations here. So I feel often like I'm sure all of you have the sense that you are shepherding your staff through this, right? And that you have a responsibility to make sure that they get information, that they have a feeling of transparency with the organization. And so for me, I'm doing that to the, I guess you could say, the grassroots and the grass tops, so the staff and the board. One of the things I've been trying to do in all my communication then is at the end is like, and what you can do right now. So I know that they want to serve and they're ready to engage, but I don't have that, I think that same, I don't know whether it's experience or history or culture that is really making a clear path forward to how each of the board members can participate. I think the ones that are serving on committees feel definitely more connected and feel like they're both really responsive, but also some other committees like board governance are doing more of the day-to-day work that also gives us like that comparative sense of normalcy. Like, we will be here in 6 months, so let's make sure we're still doing the things that are going to sustain us in the long run. But I feel I relate, and in some ways I don't, because I'm still learning how to do a lot of this well. So I just want to share that to be transparent, because some of you may be out there and you're like, I got this dialed in, and some of you may feel a little bit more like me of like, okay, today I dialed it in. We'll see if I do tomorrow, if I can be as effective. And I think it's okay to struggle with that. I'm taking this as it's a great part of my learning. In the webinar I was in before this, someone said every time there's obstacles, I see opportunity. So I'm trying to sort of live through this in that way. But it is, for me, just been really important to make sure that everyone has what they need to feel confident, that we are considering all these things, that the leadership team is working hard. We had the same experience that many of you, I'm sure, have had, is that our services remain important, but our service delivery just about disappeared. If you don't know, some of the work, the majority of the work that we do is in classrooms and courtrooms. So having schools and courts shut down pretty quickly meant we had to do a lot of work to get online. And one of the key areas that we do work in is hate crime as well. So we know there was a rise in nationwide in hate activity targeted towards the Asian American Pacific Islander communities. So that was also a key thing for our board. So that is a place that, because it's so embedded in our mission, we do have board members that are coming forward to say, how are we handling that? Who are you reaching out to? And in a time that can feel chaotic, one of the ways that the board has been helpful to me there is just kind of making sure that those top priorities continue to be prioritized in my day. So I appreciate also, sometimes it's support, but also sometimes it's accountability, because they're zoomed out a little bit and they're able to see that maybe a little bit better than I am, moment to moment. And I also wanted to add, Robert, I'm a Boys and Girls Club parent. And so I just really appreciate, I'm in Tustin, and our branch is doing the same thing. And when I saw that, I was just really excited and just really appreciate that, that I know that was a tough decision. So as a colleague and as a parent, appreciate you doing that.
That's great. Thank you, Allison. And I appreciate your level of transparency. And like you said, there's wide-ranging executive directors and CEOs on this call, I imagine, that are serving different size boards. Your constituents are different. You might be direct service, you might not be direct service. And so the way we respond and engage our board is so unique. So I appreciate you being honest and shedding some light on that. And it's such an amazing time to highlight opportunities for growth. And we don't really get exposure to those areas until we're faced with challenges. So it's very true. Noel, do you have anything to add to that?
Nothing other than I'm adjusting as everybody else, because I'm finding days quickly turn into weeks, as well as I had good intentions to communicate regularly. I'm figuring out, wow, it's been a while. So I'm still working on it. I am depending a little bit more on my staff to help me out as far as the development staff on the communications. We have a board of 17, and so in addition from our board and donors, I'm finding I'm needing help, and I'm relying on my staff to help in the communication.
Great, thank you. All right, I'm just curious, anyone can jump in here. Have any of your guys' boards gone just completely silent? It sounds like not really. It sounds like most have been pretty engaged, but is there any of your boards that have gone pretty quiet, or is everyone pretty engaged? Maybe just a hand raise. Okay. All right, well, we'll jump into the next question we have here. I thought this was a really good one. Does your board understand that that businesses are facing similar challenges as the private sector, and that it's not business as usual right now? Do they understand that nonprofits are in the same boat and you can't operate exactly the same as you were before? Not sure. Maybe Robert, if you want to take us away with that, or Noel, if you have any thoughts.
If someone thinks that business as usual in any business right now, they're extremely naive. So I don't think we have that issue at all. Our board sees obviously the challenge that's ahead. I think we won't really know what the true impact of this will be, the long-term impact for some time. But I think the consensus is this is going to affect families. This is going to affect business. This is going to affect every community across America. I had a call yesterday with one of our donors, and we both had a kind of a discussion around the long-term effect. So we're concerned that the achievement gap for kids that existed prior to this crisis is going to get wider. The kids that were not doing well in school are not doing better. The quality of instruction isn't, I think, better than what they were getting before. So just these few months, I think we'll have a significant effect on kids' education in the long term. Obviously, the unemployment is going to be something that will have a catastrophic impact on the economy. And even when things are, safe for us to go back to business, I don't anticipate a lot of these businesses are going to be able to bounce back. And so I think the long-term effect of this, we're all in this short-term zone and trying to do everything we can right now to support the immediate needs. But I think the bigger issue, which I don't think many have been able to really grasp and start to think about, is what does this do to the landscape of nonprofits across the county, across the country. I do believe that this will unfortunately lead to organizations not being able to meet the needs of the community. I think organizations are going to evolve, and then some are going to step up, but this is going to be a pretty big test for organizations. And I think our board recognizes that. I think philanthropy will be affected. Some people will be able to do more and step up and evolve, and I think some people may not. So I think the challenge of this scenario is that none of us do well in this space of just not knowing. We're all conditioned to make decisions based on what we know, and the problem is that what we know changes so frequently that it creates an additional level of stress. But I do think that in the last week or so, I've seen more organizations try to adapt to the new norm and start to kind of get past that initial emergency response. And now we're like, all right, so now that I got my bearings, now that my staff are online, now my board is, you're starting to kind of see where some of this is settled. And I think we're able to make some better decisions around, what the next few months will look like. I think it's fairly clear that schools are going to be shut down for the rest of the school year. So that, at the very least, lets us know what gaps might exist in the community as a Boys and Girls Sub. So we're working very closely with our school districts to see how we can support them over the next few weeks with distance learning, and then specifically over the summer, because these kids are going to have such a huge gap of no learning that if we don't do something significant during these summer months to help kids really catch up academically, they will start the next school year significantly behind, and it'll take us years, I think, to recover from that.
All right. Well, we're coming close to the end of the hour here. I'm gonna pose one more question to the panel, and then open it up for a short time of Q&A. So right now, if you have questions that are percolating as you've been hearing the discussion, go ahead and put those in the chat box. We'll have about 5, maybe 10 minutes at the end to discuss some of those and defer to our board or our panel for some questions. But last question, I'm curious for the panel, what kind of communication is happening with your various audiences? What kind of communication plans have you rolled out so that everyone's aware of the decisions you're making as an organization? And do you feel that your board is in the know in such a way that they can communicate clearly and are communicating the right things to constituents or people out in the community about how your organization's moving? Maybe Noel, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, for us, I guess, I assume for everybody else, just an uptick on social media, just to keep not only our board, but all those who support the charity mindful of what's happening with the charity. What are the needs? When we've asked our boards to reach out to our donors, we clearly needed to provide them bullet points because inevitably people and donors will ask them, well, what's the charity doing? How are they doing? And so we provided them with bullet points, and that kind of keeps them informed, and so we provide them support that way. And then there's the video thing. I'm not really comfortable video stuff when my staff reminds me, guys, you got to go out there weekly. They want to see faces, and so we're trying to think of myself, board members, just to keep everybody engaged, and give some highlights. I do have to share that as far as with OneOC's support, I've been involved with the executive forum, and those are executive directors where we come together once a month. And, one of the thoughts that came through, when you talked about, do you feel alone in this process? I just have to do a shout out for that executive forum that I'm a part of and have been a part of for over 2 years, because it really is, we're meeting virtually now, but really helpful on a month-to-month basis. I touch base with executive.
Well, looks like you muted yourself.
Sorry. On a month-to-month basis, just the opportunity to connect with other execs and to be honest and transparent, whatever challenges are, whether it's board or finance or just personally feeling maxed out sometimes, and having that ebb and flow. Some day you're up for stuff and other days you're not. But again, I just have to do a shout out. OneOC, you guys provide that executive forum. I know that it's facilitated by executive EC of OC, executive coaches of Orange County. Really a great asset. It helps me as an executive director not feel so alone, and I can share with other colleagues that are in the same boat, right? Thinking financial, thinking staff, thinking of juggling everything. But I had to just share that in there because it has been an asset, and more so now when we're dealing with uncertainties.
Definitely. Thanks, Noel. Any thoughts, Alison or Madelynn?
I would just add, what I said earlier, it's the weekly check-in, it's communication. I mean, making sure they know what's going on so that they can be good stewards of the information and advocate on your behalf. I'm totally with you. The video thing is very uncomfortable. I mean, I would be shocked if any of us love being in front of the video. So pulling in board members, I think that's a fantastic idea. And then, one of the other things that we did, which is really more of a stewardship opportunity on the fund development side, is we did a virtual tour of the pantry and the services that we're doing now and how they've been affected by COVID-19. So that's something that I'm sure a lot of you could replicate, to say, like, you can't come and see us, but here's what we're doing. And really being, and sharing that information with our donors and board members.
Yeah, we've definitely increased our social media outreach and reach. And yes, I did have to do my first video pieces sitting at my kitchen table. Many of you are probably like this too. It's like, okay, my kids are still asleep. Let me do it now. Okay, they went to sleep. Let me do it now. And trying to figure out, what my background looks like, all that stuff makes it even more fun than it would have been. But what we found actually, though, is that our engagement went up a ton. So not only are we pushing out more, but we feel like we're doing the right thing, because when we're giving out information about how to report hate crime or how to build community online, it's definitely been well received. So we know that, finding a way, I guess as organizations, many of us would not have thought of ourselves as maybe integral to the response right now, but we are all finding ways to use our expertise to be responders. And so I appreciate all of you who are figuring out how to do that well. And I do also really want to echo how important it is, or how beneficial it is, to have a peer group that you can go to in this time when you are supporting your board, supporting your staff, and then supporting community. If you don't have a peer group that you can go to, this would be a great time to figure out where you can go to do that. It is very helpful even when you're not in crisis, but particularly when you are. I would really encourage folks to do that, and you can have these conversations as well in that group.
Kevin, if I could just add, no one's really comfortable doing this format over in-person sort of communication, but there's so much value to people seeing us because we're still in the people business. And I could say that, I think the first couple of days we did a conference call, and I mean, it's so difficult to gauge people, but I think as leaders, we have this responsibility to help set the pace and set a direction and to assure people that we're safe. And it's really difficult for us to do that without them seeing us. So we do a daily executive Zoom session and a daily leadership team session. It's pretty short, but it's important that I think people see us and that we see them, because we're still in the people business. And I do think that there's value, especially from leadership, that we do these videos, these pre-recorded messages, these Zoom sessions, because I think people are looking to us to know if things are okay. And there's a lot more that comes out through this than in a text message, an email, or a conference call. So I would certainly encourage everyone to leverage those tools for board communication, for staff communications, for donor and partner outreach. I think it's all awkward, but this will be the new norm. I think the most we can do to connect with people and still establish these connections, I think the better off we're going to be.
Yeah, that's a great point, Robert. I mean, we're in the people business, and just this face-to-face, you're not in person, but like you said, a lot gets missed in text messages, emails. So I've been recommending that to everybody in our various webinars and trainings. The more you can, whether that's your team meetings, your one-on-ones, whatever you're doing, having that face-to-face contact is really helpful. All right, we're going to pivot for our last 5 minutes into some questions that came through on the chat box. And I'm going to defer first to Madelynn on this one, and then I'd love to hear from Tim, his thoughts. The question is, says, like Madelynn, I'm newer as an executive director. We were in the process of recruiting new board members since our board is a total of 8 members, and there are a few not very engaged. Any recommendations on how to continue our effort on recruiting board members during this time?
Yeah, so like you, Wendy, we are also in the process of recruiting board members. And so my recommendation and why I wanted to chime in is to really leverage those few engaged board members that you have and leaning on them to identify new board members and opportunities to connect. One of the things that we are doing is keep moving forward. We have our governance meeting. We're talking about officer nominations. We're talking about our board roll-offs, and just really making sure that we keep that engine going and not pause it. And so my recommendation would be to engage with those board members that are, engaged with you and your mission, to see if they can identify other new board members.
That's great, Madelynn. Thank you. Tim, any thoughts to piggyback off of that?
Yeah, just piggybacking a little bit what Robert was saying about there's so much uncertainty out there. But board development, board recruitment, identifying board members is a year-round process, no matter the situation. I think it's a matter of can you see what the not just the current need is, but what do you think where the organization is going to be heading? What are some of these focus priorities? And one element that I tend to do at OneOC and work through is, instead of just putting people new on a board, I think, Robert, you were mentioning task forces. I'm a big fan of developing task forces, especially this time. You need some specific skill-based volunteers. You need certain projects done. This is a great time to engage people and ask your board, who are those individuals out there that they may know that can engage, not necessarily start with at a board level. You may get them engaged in a particular skill set that you need right now, or there's something specific that you need to tackle as an organization. That, for instance, it could be business planning. It could be something around looking at your social media. You can look at ways to engage people that necessarily are not putting them on the board immediately. And I think it's a great way to actually build your bench, is to leverage more folks on your committees and task forces and build them up through those types of activities. And then while on a parallel track, there are going to be those opportunities for you to find board members. But I think this is a time really to hone in on what are your specific needs and see if you can get some skill-based volunteers to assist you. And they may end up being future board members.
It's a great point, Tim. Thanks for bringing that up. All right, folks, we are coming up to 12 o'clock, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I had a few people message in asking if they can have access to this. This is being recorded, so this will be available on our resource page at oneoc.org. So feel free to visit that probably in a couple of days. It probably won't be up today, maybe in the next day or two. And then I can also email it to everyone that was on the call as well. So I just want to take this time. Thank you so much to Robert, Alison, Madelynn, Noel, and Tim. We recognize you guys each have your own challenges in your own organizations and so much going on. So we really appreciate you taking the time to participate in this webinar. As a quick reminder, feel free to visit our resource page. Like I said, we have some upcoming webinars later in the week and then early next week as well as our office hour sessions are on there as well. So if you have follow-up questions, even related to strategic board planning and governance and all the things we've covered today, communication plans, feel free to sign up for some of those office hours to get some more specified help for your organization. So just want to thank you on the behalf of OneOC for tuning in today, guys, and hopefully we'll see you soon.